Could you get some steps?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, we're going to ask you.
Okay, so I see that all of my colleagues are here, and we have a quorum, and I will call this meeting to order of the Yolo County City of Davis 2x2, October 15th. And I see that I have been designated chair for the day. That is okay with everyone?
Sure.
Yeah? All right. It's good to know this before you walk in the room. All right, can I get an approval of the agenda?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We have an agenda. And then can I get an approval of the May 14th, 2025 minutes?
So moved.
Second?
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
And our minutes are approved. And that moves us along to public comment. So this is a time for anyone in the public to make comments on items that are not listed on the agenda. And do we have any takers for that? Nope. Okay. Then we'll move on to our discussion items. And I think that we will. Oh, yes. Is this your first meeting, Dario? Okay, so then we are going to introduce our new city manager. It just feels like, you've been here forever already.
It does.
He thinks so also.
Just to say a few words.
Thank you, Chair Partita, and good morning, Councilmember Chapman, Supervisor Allen, Supervisor Ferris. Dario Dunstan, City Manager, City of Davis, and yes, this is my first 2x2. I've been here a month now, and as you pointed out, dived right in. And so, yeah, I feel like an old hand already, but happy to be here and looking forward to doing what I can to contribute to successful city and county relations. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I think that we will do we want to take all the discussion items at once and then do public comment after? Or would we like to take public comment after each subsection? Is there a preference?
Either way.
Okay. So let's take public comment after each of the subsections. And the first thing up is an update on the F Street encampments and homelessness services. Dana Bailey. Forward here.
All right, good afternoon. I'm Dana Bailey. I'm the Director of Social Services and Housing with the City of Davis. I'm here with my Homeless Outreach Coordinator. This is Evan Sanders. And we thought we'd give you an update on our process with F Street and a little information about how we manage homeless outreach here in the city. Thank you. So the Social Services and Housing Department is I can't even say that we're relatively new anymore. We've been around since 2022. Our primary mission is to provide social services and outreach to vulnerable populations here in Davis. We operate a winter shelter, we've got the daytime respite center, we've got other projects that we do in cooperation with the police department, like an embedded clinician that goes out with us on our outreach, and Coffee with a Cop. If you want to learn more about what we do through the department, that's our QR code that we use for the public. So a little background on F Street. Back in April of 2024, we initially received some concerns about an encampment that was growing over at F Street. So in partnership with Yolo County Behavioral Health, we did some outreach there. And County Behavioral Health actually was able to place 9 clients in the Highwell Flats in order to have that encampment removed. But in February of this year, we saw that the encampment continued to grow. And so, again, we came together as a joint effort because the location where the encampment is located straddles a number of different property lines. There's county, there's railroad, there's private property. So a team came together of city homeless outreach, code enforcement, county behavioral health, county code enforcement, the sheriff's office, and a partnership with Pulse Place, Davis Community Meals and Housing, to come up with a process to address the encampment. So working together, we deployed a team to go out and do an assessment, find out what was going on, conduct some outreach, talk to people about, the area is really unsafe to be in, offering them alternatives, and then working with the county to address how to clear that encampment, and working with Paul's Place to see how we could get people connected to services. So here are some photos. You can kind of get an idea of where this took place. The photo on the left gives you an aerial view of where the encampment was located, and you can see where the trench is. Folks were kind of on the other side of that trench. And the photo on the right is a closer look at the encampment itself. Part of the reason why we were getting calls about concerns. Next slide. And then this is kind of a deeper look at what had actually been built at that particular site. So it really did take a lot of coordinating. We're really grateful to the county and behavioral health, and particularly we're really grateful for the ability for them to come in and do a clearance that was really productive. We're very grateful to Paul's Place for addressing a lot of the folks that were there and trying to connect them to services. What we have found is that that location is now pretty clear, and if you drive down F Street, you can see that there's even more clearance that's underway right now. It's the Conservation Corps is out there right now clearing some of the trees and some of the underbrush, so we're seeing fewer people that are there. A lot of folks have migrated into Davis on H Street, but we're also using the same process to address what's happening there. So that's our look at what happened at the F Street location. But I did want to talk a little bit about what we do in Davis as far as how outreach is deployed. You can see that Evan and his team, they've created a GIS map, and they pinpoint the locations where they're out talking to people. This map is pretty live. We try and keep it pretty active. That's my last photo from September, but you can see that it shows all the locations in Davis where we deploy outreach, where we're talking to people, where we're engaging with people, and it gives you an idea of where people land when they're in Davis. I also want to talk about the partnerships that we have. Getting people connected to services and housed really takes a number of overlapping efforts. The connection through CalAIM is a really large one. It's getting people connected to Medi-Cal so that they can be connected to healthcare and mental health services. We also work with County Health and Human Services Agency. They're the mandated agency that provides a number of behavioral health programs and other services to folks. And we also work with the Housing Authority to try and connect people to different levels of housing. It really is, like Mike coined before, an ecosystem of services, and you kind of get a feel for all of the people that are engaged in connecting people to the services that are available to them. We are working through our homeless strategic plan right now. We're in the implementation phase, and all of these are some of the partners that are working with us on that implementation phase to determine what is the priority, how are we prioritizing what's happening to people that are experiencing homelessness, what constraints do we have, given some of the changing policies that we're seeing on a federal level, some of the things that are impacting us on a local level. How do we want to prioritize where will we deploying those services out? So this group is kind of working on those conversations so that we can create an action plan on what the services will look like in Davis. Next slide. And this gives you an idea of the path that we take when we're engaging with people. You'll see that the first stop is making contact. That's kind of where Evan and his team comes in. They go out, they engage, they're talking to people, and as I've said before, it usually takes anywhere between 8 and 10 tries before we get really good information and get people that are ready and willing to connect to service. Once they are ready to connect to service, that's when engagement happens, and we refer them to an organization that can do an assessment, determine what their needs are, and then really figure out how do we help people get on their road to self-sufficiency. People are prioritized in this system, and we usually use a coordinated entry system to kind of prioritize people by need. What are you experiencing? Are you a family? What does that look like? If you're a veteran, what does that look like? So we try as a community to prioritize how we connect people to service. The case managers work on problem solving with the person because they are an integral part of how they move from where they are to self-sufficiency. So that's where that happens. And then we work on housing navigation. Once we've gotten you the basics, now there's housing navigation. I did want to give a quick update. One of the things that the city has done is partner with Heart of Davis. They're providing a safe park program. This is their first pilot. They kind of launched in June of this year. So far, they've got 5 parking spaces. They've got all of them filled, and when spaces become available, we can refer people to Safe Park. But the people that are there are served by volunteers, and they're also provided referrals out to connection to CalAIM processes, to our local providers, and to other things to kind of help them get on their feet. So that is the end of our presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you so much. Any questions? Sheila?
Can you give me examples of when you, in the process, there's the outreach, and then that if they're ready to engage, that then they're direct to a direct service provider who, I saw the circle of potential ones. I'm just wondering who you actually work with.
So the primary connection, if we're getting people connected to CalAIM, that's Communicare. Turning Point also serves as an ECM. Those are the 2 primaries that are here in town. Everyone else kind of serves as a community support. So we've got 2 entry points here in Davis for assessment. One is at Paul's Place, the other is at the Respite Center. So when outreach happens, we try to refer people to those 2 locations so we can at least start the process of doing the engagement, getting basic information about them, and then once we have that information, then we refer them out to what's the best connection. But getting people signed up on CalAIM is generally the first part, so that we can get them the services they need.
And then I know that there's going to be a change, or you're going through an RFP for providing services at the city center. Is that finished yet, or are you still in the midst of that?
We just released the RFP last week. So we are just at the beginning of that process. We've had a couple of entities have reached out and are interested in looking at it. So we'll see what happens when we get there.
And in the meantime, it's open.
It's open,
Who's
yes.
providing the services?
Right now, we are doing that with some former members of Downtown Streets team who have remained on board to work with us temporarily during this transition period.
Thank you.
So yeah, thanks so much for the overview. Appreciate it and the updates. I mean, it's clear to see, been up and down F Street over the last week or so at a couple different times, and it's like there's a lot of progress being made there. Really kind of raising the sort of canopy up and kind of thinning things out. So I mean, there's probably a lot of benefits with regard to the issues that we're talking about here, but also other benefits in terms of what that channel was originally intended to do in terms of flood protection and conveyance. A quick question, and if you could just go back just to the map, I was just curious about a couple of things. One, so appreciate that's September of this month, or this year rather. What are the different colors? Would appreciate just knowing like kind of what a little bit about that. And then also another question just around the number of individuals engaged year to date is a little over 800. Do we have a ability to track? That's not necessarily 800 unique individuals. It's some of them might have been contacted, 3, 5, 10 times. I don't know. So just curious if you could give a sense of a little bit of detail about that too. So either on both those items. Thanks so much.
Yeah, so the colors, green is if the person actually engaged with us and discussed services. And then blue is either there was no one at the actual encampment when we went out, or that they did not want to engage or discuss things with the outreach team. And so that's the differences in colors. And then we also are able to, like, we click on a specific dot, it would show you the location, like a picture of the camp, and then we're able to get like which outreach member was there, the date, and that detail, just briefly with some general information on that. And then, yes, the 816 is just contacts. We do get more, like around, usually we're seeing the same like 40 to 60 individuals for the most part in Davis throughout the year, and then we get the out-of-towners and then new people come by and stuff like that.
Thanks, that's super helpful. Two other quick questions. One, yellow, there's a couple of yellow dots on there too, I was curious.
Oh, sorry, yellow is for vehicles.
Okay.
If so, we contact somebody living in a vehicle.
Okay, got it, thanks. And then last, on the item of just sort of repeated engagements with some folks, you know, the smaller number overall, that we are noting that somewhere though? I mean, it's, you know, that we, I mean, because, I mean, I think you guys are especially, you know, and even those of us that just out and out in the community recognize a number of folks and have interaction with folks on a regular basis. Some people have been in town for a long, long time. I think as you mentioned, others obviously are, you know, more newly attracted to the community. So just was curious about how we maybe delineate, not just making sure that we're saying again that, you know, we've engaged with this one person, you know, or or in this case 40 to 60 people, you know, 10 times this year or something. I mean, as opposed to just, you know, again, I think just people, the average person might see this and be like, whoa, 800, but, you know, realizing it's really much more of a, you know, 40 to 60 to 100 kind of core individuals that are, you know, I mean, kind of repeated engagements. So
Yeah, and we're careful about how we track that data too, because if we're using our homeless management information system, HMIS, HUD is very specific about how we record contacts versus how we record engagement. And so we will see a lot of contacts that happen, not just through our homeless outreach team, but through other providers and other partners that are out doing outreach throughout the region. So we'll see lots of contacts, and it's good to track that information because we can look into HMIS and we can kind of get a feel for where's the last place that we saw this person. And that's helpful when we've got entities like Mobile Med that are like, oh, we need to see this person because we need to do a follow-up. Has anybody seen them? Well, because we're keeping these contacts, we can look in the system, we can tag it to the system. This is the last person, we saw this person, maybe you can engage with them there, and we can track it that way. And as I said before, it takes a lot of contacts before we gain enough trust for people, until people are really ready to be engaged. And at that point, at least here in Davis, it's really helpful that we're able to send them to one of our 2 locations where they've probably been already to kind of go in and get a meal or get a shower or get some laundry. But then now they are ready to engage with the caseworkers that are actually there on site and will sit down and answer questions. There are a lot of questions about their experiences of homelessness, and that takes trust to answer those questions. So.
Thank you, appreciate that. One last quick item, so for both of you, appreciate this explanations and such, but just, I recognize this seems like it's more based on the title, encampment contact, right? But I will notice that there's literally no dots in and around, you know, the respite center, you know, Fifth and L. There's definitely a lot of activity there though, certainly, and so I'm assuming how is that being tracked, right? In engagement with, from that homeless outreach coordinator team, you know, curious about that, because it's just, I mean, granted, this is only September, but I mean, you know, folks are maybe not have a full encampment set up in the direct vicinity of the respite center, but there's certainly, I would imagine, a lot of contact and interaction with folks there.
So yeah, this is specifically, the dots are just encampments or where we contacted where like a vehicle where someone's living. General contacts, we have a log that we keep, and we do it by district. So if we're in District 1 and we contact somebody there, then we log it as that person was contacted in District 1 on the date that we contacted them. And so then every time when we do our contacts at the end of the month, we'll do a monthly report to council or to city management that I provide to Dana, and it'll show how many contacts in each district that we made that for that month.
Great, thanks so much.
And then around places like the respite center too, again, because we've got providers that are there that are also doing a little outreach as well, our teams are not out in that area in particular around respite, because we've got the respite team that's talking to the people that are on that street, and then at Paul's Place all along H, the folks there that are engaging with people there as well.
Great, thank you so much.
Anyone else on this? No? All right. Josh.
Sure. Just a quick question, I think I know the answer. So when do you track, so you go out and you talk to somebody on the map that was just there, whether it's a vehicle or somebody you engage with, the number of times that you have contact with them before they reach out and have certain, and get access to services, do we have that number on average? Do you track that?
So if we're getting them as, like, we actually input their name into the Survey 123 app for the GIS, they get assigned a specific ID number. And so I could search that ID number and see how many, the dots would come up for every time we contacted that specific ID number.
Got it.
And would show for that specific individual where the locations are that we contacted that person. Their name doesn't show, it's just assigned a specific number, but then we would have our own logs that we make of the individual, and so we can go by based off month, and then we can see how many times we contacted this person that month, and then go each month and can see like how many times we contacted them throughout the year and things like that.
And then how do you know if they go to respite or go to Paul's Place? If the people that are working there are managing those areas, how does our homeless outreach team know, wow, this person actually went and got services?
So we will make the referral. Once they are engaged with the actual case manager, unless the case manager has further need of us, then it's moved on to it's another process.
Just
And so, yeah, it becomes another process. Now, we may see that person out and about, and like I said, our team, because they've gained the trust, they may talk about, what they're doing. But case management and the housing navigation and all of that is a different process than what our insurance do.
Yeah, I think for the kind of underpinning of my line of book questions is just kind of, how do we measure, like how do we show people that it's successful, right? That the outreach is working, because I think we all know that it takes a lot of time to do it, sometimes it doesn't. But I think having like anecdotal stories or like, we were able to connect, 25 people that we contacted on average this number of times went and got services. And like, that's a great thing, I think, for not just people sitting up here, but our community to hear that, that the work's being done and that there is success in that world. Because oftentimes people just see, what they see every single day and don't know the hard work that you guys are doing and the success that's happening because they still see somebody out there walking on the street or in an encampment, right? So I think it's important to be able to carry that message.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason that, on a monthly basis, we try and give our updates, because usually we're getting information from our outreach team. Paul's Place will send us success stories, Respite will send us success stories, and that gives us, we can report those success stories out to you. And we've done, most recently, we've had a person that, longtime chronic homeless here in the city, was recently placed in senior housing over in Woodland. So, we try and provide that information to you. So we do have it. When we get those success stories, we forward them up.
Thank you.
Thank you, and I have two questions. One is on the strategic plan, on the homelessness strategic plan. I understand that you are just getting your team, you're sort of like your...
The implementation.
Right, and so there's like a group of folks that are working together as part of that strategic plan. And so that, remind me where you are in the like timeline of that?
So our intent is to come back to council and make a presentation sometime around March or April, after we determine, after we prioritize how we want to respond, if we're going to respond to a specific target population here in Davis, based on the data that we have, and then based on the availability of services, where we think we will kind of target those services here in Davis. Those conversations are still happening, and because the nice thing about having so many people at the table, like we've got DJ USD at the table, Community Cares at the table, Paul's Place, so many different folks, each one that has a different experience of who's experiencing homelessness in Davis. We know that we can't be all things to all people right now. We know that budgets are really kind of restricted. And so we're making a decision about where will we have the most bang for our buck? Where can we get people out of their situation as quickly as possible? But though that sausage making right now is still happening.
Okay.
I can tell you this, that The concern that has come forth from all of the people at the table is the concern that people are falling into homelessness faster.
Right.
And so one of the things that they want to focus on is prevention. And the prevention factor really is impacting families. So that's something that the group is grappling with, because we also know that we have a lot of senior chronic homeless folks that need support too. So those are some of the conversations that we're having.
Okay, and then the other question that I had was around the F Street encampments. Do you have a sense of who is there? Like folks who maybe have been there for a really long time, and then folks who are transiently passing through there, and do you keep track of like trends, right? Because it would be good to know if all of a sudden we're seeing a whole bunch of new people that are showing up here versus folks that have always been there, and what are the reasons that we can't move those sort of regulars out?
And we do. And especially on F Street, we've gotten some feedback from Paul's Place. There are a couple of folks there, couples, that have been in that location for years, have been offered the opportunity to move someplace else and continuously return. Still working with those folks, even though we've talked, it's just harder because they've been there for so long to have them move. So I know that we do have some folks that are regular inhabitants of that location.
And so just moving around in general, when the city, Caltrans or county or railroad remove like a good section of camps, they tend to relocate to other areas of the city. So I know just recently we had the F Street removal earlier this year, and then there was also a bigger removal by the camps over in Nietzsche Field. And so we've noticed the majority of those people just moved over to the H Street area in town. And then in the past, when we've removed people from the H Street area, they moved back down to F, or they moved over to like along I-80 railroad tracks. And so there's kind of just those sections along the railroad and freeways that they tend to relocate based on where they're getting moved and where they can kind of stay and not get moved right away.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? No? Okay, thank you for the presentation. Thank you for the work. So next up, we have Drew Avenue Pacifico project update, and Ms. Monica. Oh, I thought we did have a comment. Do we have? Okay, public comment. Okay.
Good afternoon. For the benefit of our new city manager, and welcome to Davis. I welcome Mike Webb back to Davis, so I had to welcome you as well. My name is Dan Carson. I'm a former Davis City Council member and also a former member of this very panel. The hat I'm wearing today is I'm on the governing board now of Davis Community Meals and Housing. We are participating in the strategic planning effort for homelessness, but also you should know that I'm working with Carrie Ziegler on our board. We're pursuing a strategic plan. We've never had one for Davis Community Meals and Housing in 30 years of operation. We know this is a good time to do that work. Just really, so I'm here mainly to listen and learn. Just two quick points. One is we share your concern about the potential here for seriously dwindling resources at the very time we could be hit hard with an increase in demand for our assistance. And we really appreciate the partnerships that we've had with the city and the county and your partnership together in trying to address this. It's going to be critical in managing the decisions that are coming at the federal level, and they're hitting the state, and they're hitting the county, and they're hitting the city, and any of us on our own are going to be able to deal with this, but working together, we think obviously our chances to at least try to weather the storm as best we can.
Thank you. Okay, so now we're going to move on to Drew Avenue Pacifico, and Monica Morales is, oh, okay.
I'm going to provide neighbors.
You're going to start, okay.
Let Monica
Your
come over.
name's not on this.
Yeah. Her name's on there, but you know, I have to delegate it to myself on this one. So, but thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Good to see you. Good to be here. Chambers looks great, by the way. I love the chairs and the screens. It's all very nice. Brief update on Pacifico. This is specifically with respect to the partnership between the city and the county on Pacifico for 2 buildings that were identified for a partnership with the CalWorks program, which is specifically CalWorks for families. And for the last basically a couple of years now, the city and the county have been actively engaged in working towards trying to achieve, the funding and securing funding and agreements and so forth to get 2 of the 4 buildings at Pacifico rehabilitated, upgraded, and ready for occupancy through the CalWorks program. Unfortunately, here today, I'm here to tell you some shifting of our progress on that due to some circumstances that really are outside of our control and are, I'll just say, very unfortunate, but it's no signal of our indication and interest in continuing to partner with the city to try to make something happen out here. In short, we are needing to hit pause on the CalWorks Pacifico project, and I'll articulate some of the key reasons for that. We're facing some significant, basically insurmountable headwinds, I'll say, with respect to the state funding that was going to be the primary source and match with the city's funds to do the project rehabilitation. And so in no particular order, those headwinds are, first, there's been some discussion for quite some time about the timeline for expenditure of the CalWorks funds from the state. The previous messaging on that had always been that the funds need to be encumbered by the end of this calendar year, meaning that everyone took that to mean that the funds need to be in contract. If we had a general contractor on board lined up to start initiating the improvements to the property, that would be sufficient. It's become clear over the last couple of months from the state that is not the case, and they're requiring that the funds in fact be fully expended by the end of this calendar year. So that's December 31st. The timeline makes it effectively impossible to accomplish that. We certainly could have a contractor on board and lined up, likely by the end of the year if all the stars aligned, but we would not be able to get all the funds, roughly 1.4 million of CalWorks funds, out the door also by the end of the calendar year. And as a reminder too, this is also based on an extension that we already received from June. The prior deadline was June 30th. That was extended 6 months to December, the end of December of this year. So that's headwind number 1. Sort of a 1B component to that is if the county does not expend those funds from CalWorks by the end of the calendar year, we must revert them back to the state altogether. So in order to give the county time to pivot and spend those funds on CalWorks eligible programs and services by the end of this calendar year, we have to make a decision effectively now in order to allow our staff the time and our board the time to provide direction and our staff time to implement basically a repurposing of those funds to other CalWorks eligible services and programs, which we do have a plan in place to accomplish that as sort of our plan B, should something like this have occurred. So that's the first of 3 significant headwinds. The other 2 are, one, some news came to light, again, just fairly recently actually, that the state is also requiring that the county put a 20-year covenant on the property to accompany the CalWorks funding the grant funds. Again, roughly 1.4 million on the county's piece of it, but the state is fairly adamant that a 20-year covenant needs to be put in place whereby the county would have to commit to housing CalWorks families on the property for a full 20-year period minimum. However, there is no funding guarantee of CalWorks funds coming from the state, which the county would be using to support housing CalWorks families on the property. In fact, our understanding is that we don't have any guarantee of CalWorks funding coming from the state to the county for more than the next 2 years After that, it's very questionable to what extent, if at all, there may be CalWORks funding coming to the county to support this. So from a fiscal, prudency, point of view, it makes it very challenging for us to commit to a 20-year commitment of ongoing expenditures when we don't know that the revenues are going to be there to support it. We did have some discussion and some negotiation with the state around the 20-year covenant. They did express an interest in hearing a proposal from us for an alternative solution, which we got back to them and provided our thoughts on what might be more acceptable. They came back with still requiring the 20 years. But they said that they would be okay with applying the 20 years to half the units instead of the entire project. Unfortunately, that doesn't help us with respect to the financial situation, whether it's 1 unit or 10 units. The circumstances are the same in terms of the financial revenue flow issue. Let's see, on top of that, I will say is the third headwind, which is somewhat illustrative of the second one that I just described, which is to say that there's a lot of volatility right now in a number of revenue streams coming from the federal and state governments to counties in particular. Yolo County is no exception to that. We're seeing a lot of volatility in funding streams from programs and services at very fundamental levels that are affecting our budgets. For CalWORks in particular, just on Friday of last week, we received word from the state that the state is reducing CalWORks funding by roughly $42 million across the state for this current fiscal year that we are now in. And that translates to the Yolo County share of that is $600,000 reduction. And again, I'll reinforce that that's in the current fiscal year that we just adopted our budget for 3 weeks ago. So it's $600,000 reduction to current and existing CalWORks programs and funding that we would not have been able to anticipate before getting this news on Friday. So effectively, the $1.4 million that we have from the CalWORks grant may serve as a very important lifeline to our county budget in order to help shore up that what is now a $600,000 hole that we have to either fill or we have to reduce services and staffing to existing CalWORks programs, including the CalWORks Families program, which we've been focused on here. So in summary, those are the headwinds that we're facing. As I said, they're not insignificant at all. The conversations that I've had with our board members, obviously those are not easy or fun conversations to have, but I think they're ones that we have to have, and we have to have them quickly in order to pivot in time to not lose the funds. I'll just reinforce a couple of things very briefly, and then I'll turn to supervisors to see if they have anything they might like to add. But first and foremost, the conversation I had with Darielle earlier this week about this, I just want to reinforce that the county, this is no indication that the county is not interested and ready, willing to partner with the city on this or any other project. And I think we remain very much committed to doing so. In this case, it's not going to be with the CalWORks funding and program, but we are absolutely, ready, willing to be partners on whatever the future may hold, for this property or other sites in Davis for affordable housing and supporting those in need. So just reinforcing our commitment there. And then secondly, there's some tangible benefits that we do have already in hand. The county has expended significant funds to generate the plans for the 2 buildings. They are 95% complete. And there's been significant investment with professional architectural firm to develop those plans. To the extent that the city can find value in those plans, with whatever the next steps are moving forward, we would love to work with the city to find a pathway to help with that. So we otherwise, it feels like a very small, token or gesture, but hopefully it's one that could help. So in short, that's the summary I have. I wish it was better news, but happy to answer any questions I'll turn to the board for questions or other comments.
Mrs. Sheila, add anything?
So disappointing. That's my major comment. Been working on this for a while. Coulda, shoulda been done earlier, but it didn't. And here we are today in different circumstances. I did, just to let people know, ask about like where these families that could have, should have been in Pacifico, where will they go now? And there are other facilities throughout the county and a limited amount in Davis, but unfortunate that we won't have this in this form, this facility in Davis.
Yeah, I've said the same. It's a really unfortunate, sort of series of events to led us to this point, but I think that we're seeing the challenges on a whole range of fronts, not just this particular project, but in terms of, sort of softening or disappearing of funding sources from both the feds and the state at this point, and the ability to do backfilling, and so I'm hopeful that there can still be a positive situation out of this entire arrangement. I think, it might give the city now, it was only meant to be a portion of the site, so perhaps now the city has, the ability with having the entirety of the site to sort of reimagine what that might come out of it. Certainly, I think we all probably are in agreement that there's a higher and better usage of the site than what exists today. And so I think we felt that for a while now. So, but yeah, really disappointed as well, but also completely kind of recognize the sort of convergence of events that have led us to where we're at. So it's unfortunate.
Josh?
No. Well, no, I have nothing really to add. Just thank you to the people who are not here and people who are here who spent 10 years working on projects for this site, and for the past 5 years, this specific program. Thank you for your time, and I don't know, we'll figure out what to do next.
So, so there's a whole lot of disappointment here. And definitely, as Josh says, we've been working on this for a very long time and trying to get our hands around a solution, because we have housing, that potential housing that's sitting there that could do a lot of good for a lot of people. And so it's always disappointing. I know that we've all been working really hard and diligently to try to find some solutions for this. I do have some questions around like the 20-year covenant and things like that. Is that only attached if it goes to Pacifico? Because obviously you're going to take this money and you're going to do something else with it that will benefit. And I understand it has to be used for CalWorks types of projects, but all of those projects don't have a 20-year covenant attached to them. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, in this case, because the scope of the project is specifically to do rehabilitation in order to prepare the buildings for CalWorks families and to be eligible and meet those criteria, that's what the trigger was for the state to require the 20-year covenant. It's typically, for other CalWorks program expenditures, there's a whole variety of other mechanisms that we employ at the county to assist with CalWorks families, including rent assistance, down payment assistance, wraparound services in other existing housing units. And so the 20 years doesn't apply when you're helping people in placing them in existing housing units. It's only when you're helping to generate or produce, the housing units that the 20-year applies.
Okay, because I'm curious about whether or not, at least a portion of that amount of money that was going to be coming into Davis could still flow into Davis if we have any eligible projects in Davis that might benefit from this. Because I know that I'm on it's a very long title and I get the words mixed up, the Executive Committee to End Homelessness. When they were allocating funds, I think it was like the HAP funds or whatever, the rubrics had changed, and so there were no projects in Davis that that received any of the funding from that. It all like went to West Sacramento or Woodland or other places. And so I know Paul's Place, for instance, was one of the entities in Davis that had applied for funds and received none. And if there's any way that they could receive some additional funding for the work that they're doing. I know there are some, the city has a couple of duplexes that are next to Paul's Place that they have been using for families, for, you know, women who have children. They house them in those units. And I know that there are other places in Davis that are eligible for CalWORks monies. And so it would be helpful to be able to extend some of the work that groups are doing in Davis.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question, and we are in the process right now of formulating what a pivot looks like. And to get the funds out the door by the end of the calendar year, we will be focusing probably almost entirely upon funding program services locations that already exist, you know, within the network, so that we can get the money out the door in time. I will say, for example, we work with Mutual Housing here in Davis for access to 16 supportive housing units that are specifically set aside for CalWORks families. And that's something we could look further at. I'll turn to Monica to be chatting with her team about what we could do and how those funds are spread across the county. Fourth and Hope is another significant location where we're looking to make some additional investments, which, yes, it's located in Woodland, but there's, you know, direct help and support for Davis folks and countywide, you know, residents, of course, in that, amongst other examples. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And so,
Just one quick comment, Madam Chair. Yeah, I mean, I know we're kind of belaboring a little bit, but just, I mean, I completely understand the frustration, and there's a kind of a, you know, bit of a commentary of like Davis doesn't get its share or whatever. And I mean, I think, you know, there's a lot of other things that we can point to that are both in this category and also others that where Davis is getting its share. I mean, we're building a $22 million Walnut Park library. Other parts of the county are not getting a new library, for example. Paul's Place, Yolo Crisis Nursery, I mean, and these are all countywide amenities as well, too. I mean, you know, certainly Crisis Nursery is. That, you know, so, I mean, I completely, 1,000% am on board with the frustration around not receiving, you know, this project not moving forward, but I think there's also, I mean, I want to see some of these things located in Davis, and dollars directed towards Davis certainly, but I also recognize, like, I mean, that we were operating in a kind of a regional ecosystem, not just a, you know, it's like one community gets something to the detriment of someone else, so it's just, yeah, just a comment.
sure, I appreciate that. I think, for sure, we know that homelessness is pretty porous, and it, you know, moves back and forth between the communities. It was, as I said, it was a little disheartening to see when the funds were distributed for the HAP funding that you know, we didn't receive any of those funds, and so not necessarily from the county, but you know, in other ways, it does feel like there are a lot of ways that we don't qualify, but we still have the needs that we have to meet. Okay, anyone? No. All right, so now we'll turn to public comment. I believe we have a public commenter on this.
Yeah, I'm Martha Teeter, and I just want to encourage the city and the county to deal with Pacifico as a shell that has so much potential. It also has a lot of struggles to it in that in housing those who are vulnerable and have had a lot of trauma. The units talk to each other, and hopefully the new plans have eliminated the air ducts linking areas of it, and that we can see some progress on getting people housed rather than ending leases, as I believe we are doing now, so that originally it was intended for individuals. Now we were moving toward families, and people were ending existing leases. So I just want to encourage us to be creative, looking at other sources of funding that might be able to come in the interim to get us to a new affordable housing area, either transitional, but hopefully some permanent housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further public comments on this item? I'm not seeing, okay.
I'm not public, but I
Okay, sure.
just to say that the county continues to be committed to trying to work together with the city to see in these dwindling financial times that we still are jurisdictions that want to work together for the good of the people, and that there are people in the city of Davis that need to have the kind of supports that we need to continue to work to try to find solutions. So I'm there with you. Let's figure this out, something.
Thank you. Okay, so now we're on to C, and this is mental health funding. And now we have Monica Morales.
Were you here last month? I don't remember.
No, it wasn't.
No, so welcome to you too, so many new team members.
Yeah, thank you for having me, appreciate it.
Our new Health and Human Services.
Yes, so, good afternoon, everybody. Monica Morales, 4 months in the job, so I'm very happy to be here, and thank you for your patience. I've been, just a lot is happening for us right now. We're all just trying to grapple with all of the different policy and funding changes. I do want to give you guys a brief update, just because some of the key changes actually are going to get pushed out to the 21st of October regarding our Mental Health Services Act funding. But let me level set for you in the audience as well as to kind of where we are at. We did go to the board in September and in August to present information on where we were at. And as a reminder, for those that might not have been present at the board meeting, we are unfortunately struggling with a structural deficit in our MHSA funding. So right now, currently for this fiscal year, we're having to navigate a $4 million deficit. If things don't change, next year it's going to be a $5 million deficit. And to top things off, we're also going through a significant policy change with Proposition 1, which does a couple of things. Typically, we get about $14 million of funding in MHSA. Now we have to set aside 5% back to the state out of those $14.8 million. We also have to move 30% of that funding, so about $4.4 million, into our housing, our behavioral health, county behavioral health clients. So that leaves us about $9.5 to $10 million. And the state says, and you also have to make sure, as we heard Supervisor Allen mention, to focus on those experiencing SMI or severely mental illness, move away from the prevention, and even in the early intervention, focus on those already in systems like, justice involved folks, people that are homeless. So very, very much narrowing down what we can do with MHSA dollars. So as a result, we went to our Board of Supervisors. We said, hey, we have to unfortunately look at a $4 million deficit now. We said, these are our potential scenarios. Obviously, no decisions are made. I just want to be super clear. No decisions have been made at this point. The board tasked us to make sure that we came back with more information about our current efforts that are funded under MHSA, bring back a little bit more data in terms of their outcomes, what are the impacts depending on funding reductions, and they also wanted more information on our mandate and a little bit more on kind of where we are at as a system of care. So we went back. We are scheduled now to present to the board on the 21st of October with a couple things that also have changed in the past couple of weeks. So one of them, which is, yay, we've got an additional allocation of resources that we now are able to, utilize as we think about the impacts and the deficits. And so one of them is $40 million from our cannabis revenue. So now that has been allocated to this effort. In addition,
400,000.
Not million.
thank you.
Wouldn't that be done? We've fixed the
What do
problem.
they got
Thank
going on?
you.
Cannabis out there.
Thank you.
I think we all need it at this point, but yeah.
I'm getting too excited here. Thank you so much for that clarification.
They'd be happier people, yeah.
In addition, we got $96,000 from our board-directed project fund. So now we have a total of about $146,000 that we didn't have before for us to think about. So we're going to come back to the board and basically bring back potential scenarios, everything from the original reductions of about 45% of cuts depending on the program, all the way to 25% or no cuts depending on the program. I will say that, the way that it's looking now, it's about a 2.6 reduction to county behavioral health programming and about a 1.2 reduction, depending on, because there's a lot there to still kind of tease out on our partners, community-based organizations as a total. So a lot of discussions that we still need to have. We will come back to the board and report to you on what the board, the council, on what the board decides at that point. But at least for now, we just want to make sure that you had an update on the current circumstance. And I'll pause there and take questions or see if anybody wants to add anything else.
Anything to add? Any questions? Josh?
Nope.
No? Wow. You did such a great job.
Thank you.
Is there any public comment on this item from anyone here? Okay, easy peasy.
One quick item, just sorry, apologies. I thought I kind of figured Supervisor Allen would say something about it. So, it's been an interesting process so far. I would say, the meeting that we discussed this, there were only 3 of us participating in that discussion. So Supervisor Allen and myself and Supervisor Sandy. Supervisor Vegas was not with us, and Supervisor Bronx had recused himself. So just one point there. I think the proposed cuts to prevention and sort of community partnerships, some of that, especially around prevention, is not included in the BHSA. And that was what voters chose to prove that. And so that's a real challenge, because I think we all recognize that prevention is important, and it's kind of where we need to be putting some energy and effort and funding, because for a variety of reasons. I think the board at the time also, those of us there talked about wanting to provide sort of, say, off-ramps or abilities for, actually more of a runway, right? That's the better analogy, but a little bit of a runway for especially the community partners. So for example, the proposal was just kind of across the board, everybody gets a 45% cut this year, everybody gets a 45% cut next year, which basically is 100%, just shy of that. And that's a lot, and especially over the course of 12 months. So for an ability for all of these partners, that includes the school districts, it includes First 5 Yolo, it includes Nami Yolo, it includes a variety of entities, to give a little bit of runway for them to help be able to make up some of that lost revenue over the course of a little bit longer time, not just in one fell swoop. I think the other part of this that is that there is an effort at the state or at the county level, but to start doing much more billing for CalAIM reimbursements, right? There's an effort to start to do direct billing. So like the school districts that are currently part of the K-12 schools partnership, they are going to start to be doing some direct billing of the state. There's an ability, First 5 Yolo is getting ready to do direct billing to the state. So I think the reason for raising that is that, again, that's another reason for sort of a little bit of a longer runway, right? Give a little bit more time for some of these partners that are currently receiving funds from the county to be able to sort of start doing direct reimbursement to the state and getting reimbursed for the services provided. The last quick point, I think, is just around the county itself, Yolo County, many other counties too, but we are currently not billing at the statewide average for CalAIM reimbursement. I don't know exactly what percentage that is, but we have an ability to do more of that ourselves as a county. And so while there's definitely a kind of an increasing consolidation and, shrinking of funds coming from the state, or reallocation of funds, again, for moving to some of these dollars towards housing, for example, I think we have work to do as our own county to try and do an increased job as it relates to billing of the state for reimbursement. So that's just a couple additional points but I really appreciate Monica's work on this so far, and Tony Kildare as well, and just the entire staff. But and we'll sort of see how things go on the 21st. So stay tuned.
So just a couple things. Next week, we're going to be having a vote on the MHSA, so the current for this fiscal year that already started, by the way, we're in October, so it started on July 1. Then right away, we have to get our plan in order for next year for the new Behavioral Health Services Act funds. So there are some community outreach opportunities. They're available online. You can look to see whether, I think there's one tonight or tomorrow. I don't know, there's one very soon. There's 3 of them. I think one is tonight. But anyhow, so there are opportunities to give input for the next one, and then we're going to be making those decisions. So anyone interested in this area, please keep your input.
Yeah, Supervisor Allen, we have at 6 p.m. tomorrow, we have a BHSA, the second housing listening session. It's on Zoom, so it'll make it convenient. 6 to 7:30. We have links to info on our website if everyone's interested.
Thank you. That it does sound very, very challenging, and it is, it's hard to hear that they are pulling funds away from prevention when, we just had, just heard earlier that, they're trying to prevent people to go, falling into homelessness, and recognizing that prevention is so important. And then in another area, they're, pulling money away from prevention. So the ability to bill those, you have to be a Cali provider to do that? I mean, do you have to be Cali certified? Because I know that's
my understanding, but that's not my day-to-day
And then, like for school districts, are they Cali
So,
certified?
There's a couple buckets that we are very blessed here in California. I know it doesn't seem like it, but not everybody has this opportunity to have Cali across the nation. If you're part of this school, it's called the school fee schedule. That's an entire different process. CALIM embodies a couple of different opportunities. Enhanced care management, or what we call ECM, community supports, right? And then buckets of social services as well. But those have different paths. You do have to work through the managed care plans in the state, depending on what you're doing, to actually enter into agreements and then build that billing component. This is where what I've noticed our community-based organizations get stuck, because the billing piece can be complicated, and you need to build that infrastructure, you need to understand the coding methods, you need to, that whole process can take some time for our CBOs. Yeah.
Yeah, and that has been a challenge for the providers, and I was happy to see that I think that there is some support for entities that want to become CalAIM providers, because it is very complicated. And can you remind me who is it that does that support? Who is it that does like the training and the getting people on board?
The state has a very robust framework for this. There's some TA assistance from the state, but they also funded across the state, depending on your jurisdiction, certain entities to provide a lot of that training on how do you think about the billing, the type of programming, right? Like the infrastructure, different models. I'm happy to kind of get you, because I don't have it right here handy, the technical assistant entity that we use here in our county.
Right, so there's like this sort of like hand-holding that
Yes,
we do for folks. And I think that is going to be really important. And that money, the support for those, for that type of help is separate from what you've been cut, correct?
Very simple.
Okay, well, that's good to know.
Yeah, I mean,
Because I think that's going to be really important to make sure that people are connected, especially since you know, they're gonna have to have that ability to do the direct billing.
Yeah, I encourage, I'll be covering a little bit, but I encourage if you do have time to listen to the changes that Proposition 1's gonna have, but then, you know, what they're doing is they're narrowing the work for counties to focus on those that are severely mentally ill.
Sure.
But there have been opportunities with the Children and Youth Behavioral Health Initiative at the state level, billing, like literally millions of dollars. There's also now the work that the Department of Public Health will be doing. There's also work that the Behavioral Health Advisory Commission's doing, and they all now have buckets of funding through Prop 1 or existing buckets that they had to continue some of the innovation, prevention, and early intervention efforts. So it's almost like they are reworking, it's the same money, they're just reworking it in different ways.
Okay, all right, great, thank you for that clarification. Yes.
Just for some good news for Davis, we just had our 2x2 with the school district, and they are way down the road and nearly ready to do their, one of the first in the state to be able to do their ECM work through partnership health plan primarily. Because, you know, you can't, there's also bad news, is that, you know, not right now, but pretty soon, there's going to be fewer people who are eligible for Medi-Cal. So just knowing that the ECM program are for people who are eligible for Medi-Cal. So, anyway, were you happy for 1 second? Brought you back.
Okay, so I've asked for public comment on this already, I believe, yes. Okay, so this moves us on to city manager updates, CAO updates.
Thank you, Chair Partita. One update and one announcement. It was mentioned earlier that the city is seeking requests for proposals. We're looking for a service provider to run our respite center operations, and that closes on Friday, October 24th. And I just wanted to remind everyone, we're all well aware there are 2 significant development projects, Willow Grove, or the old Shriners, and Village Farms, thank you. And we're working those applications through the process, and there are several meetings coming up in the coming months. The next big one is November 4th, which will be a workshop for the Village Farms project. And just wanted to assure everybody that we are working diligently to move both of those applications through the process, because we very much need housing. So, thank you.
Thank you, Dario. Just a couple of updates. I mentioned earlier the county budget adoption. You know, we have a 2-part process where we have the recommended budget that gets approved by the board in June. The adopted budget, however, was adopted just a few weeks ago before the October 2nd deadline. And so we have a balanced budget on the books and approved by the board. Doesn't mean that it's roses and butterflies and rainbows, though. There's significant challenges, as we mentioned earlier. We now really set our sights towards basically writing the structural budget ship in the years ahead. So that's where a lot of our focus is headed right now. The federal shutdown, of course, we are carefully monitoring and tracking, as I'm sure all jurisdictions around the state and the nation are, as far as what are the impacts of that. We've been fortunate to date that the impacts have been minimal to safety net services and programs, many of which are funded in advance, a month in advance, or are exempt from federal shutdown, like Social Security and Medicare. But it doesn't mean that there aren't service impacts in terms of customer service and responsiveness to questions or issues or enrollments and things like that. So we're keeping a careful eye on it, because if things become even more protracted than they already are, the closer we get to November, the greater likelihood that there's much more significant impacts where there's not backstop funding in place. And in the past, the state has actually stepped forward and helped with backstop funding, but the state is not in as good a financial position as it once was when it last occurred. So obviously, we're a little bit on pins and needles in the hopes that Congress figures out a path to get an approved spending plan and federal government reopened. So with respect to Other changes going on again at the state level, of course, we're tracking changes to state legislation that will go into effect next year. This is the governor, the deadline for him to sign or veto bills, was just a couple days ago. So there's a number of bills that have passed through or will become law. Some are effective in January, others are effective July 1st. And the one that affects all of us is, for example, SB 707, which is the new law that will govern, public meetings and Brown Act meetings and public participation and remote meetings and so forth. So we've got a little bit of runway to prepare for that. I'm sure we'll be in touch. I'm sure Daryl and I will be chatting and comparing notes a little bit on our plans, but we're already starting the process of preparing plans for how we're going to be compliant with that moving forward. And then lastly, Daryl mentioned the two peripheral development projects under review by the city, Village Farms Davis and Willow Grove. The county too is making our preparations and getting ready to engage with the city on those projects. Of course, for things like texture agreements and such. And so we'll be in further contact, to help get those meetings scheduled and timing arranged for that. Thank you. That's all I have.
Any supervisor council communications people want to share? No? All right. Okay, well, that gets us to number 9, which is a look at our upcoming meeting dates and chair designations. And so is there any changes that people want to make to these dates or anything that people can see won't be able to happen for you? All right, okay, then we're adjourned.